The violent shuddering of the ship's hull jolted Captain Sarah Chen awake. Warning klaxons blared as her small exploration vessel plummeted through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet. Sarah's hands flew across the control panel, desperately trying to stabilize her descent. Come on, she muttered, gritting her teeth as the ship bucked and heaved. The ground rushed up to meet her, a blur of purple vegetation and glittering crystal formations. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship slammed into the alien soil, skidding to a halt in a furrow of upturned earth and shattered crystal. For a long moment, Sarah sat motionless in her pilot's chair, ears ringing in the sudden silence. She took a shaky breath, running a quick mental inventory of her body. Nothing felt broken, though she'd have an impressive collection of bruises come morning. "Status report," she croaked, her throat dry from the acrid smoke filling the cockpit. The ship's eye responded, its voice eerily calm. "Hull integrity compromised. Life support systems at 62% capacity. Communication array offline. Engines non-functional." Sarah sighed, unstrapping herself from the chair. "Fantastic. Any good news?" "Exterior atmosphere is breathable, though I would advise caution due to potential pathogens." "Well, it beats suffocating in here," Sarah muttered, grabbing her emergency pack and making her way to the airlock. She hesitated for a moment before cycling it open, her hand resting on the blaster at her hip. First contact situations were always dicey, and she had no idea what awaited her on this alien world. The airlock hissed open, and Sarah stepped out onto the planet's surface. The air was thick and humid, carrying the scent of unfamiliar flora. Twin suns hung low on the horizon, bathing the landscape in a surreal purple twilight. Crystal formations jutted from the ground at odd angles, refracting the fading sunlight into dazzling prismatic displays. Sarah had barely taken a few steps when she heard it, a soft, keening cry that sent shivers down her spine. It sounded almost childlike. Her curiosity piqued. She cautiously made her way towards the source of the sound. As she rounded a large crystal formation, Sarah froze. There, huddled against the translucent surface, was an alien creature. It was vaguely humanoid, with iridescent blue skin and large, liquid eyes. In its arms, it cradled a smaller version of itself, clearly a child. The adult alien's eyes widened as it spotted Sarah. It clutched the child closer, making a series of rapid clicking sounds that Sarah's universal translator couldn't quite parse. The alien's body language, however, was unmistakable: fear, protectiveness, and a hint of desperation. Sarah slowly raised her hands, palms out, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "It's okay," she said softly, knowing the alien couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone would convey her meaning. "I'm not here to hurt you." The alien hesitated, its gaze darting between Sarah and the smoking wreckage of her ship. Slowly, it relaxed its grip on the child, who peeked out curiously at the strange new arrival. Sarah cautiously took a step closer, pointing to herself. "Sarah," she said clearly. Then she gestured to the alien. "Who are you?" The alien seemed to understand the question. It placed a hand on its chest and made a melodic trilling sound. "Zara," Sarah's translator finally managed to interpret. "Zara," Sarah repeated, smiling. She then pointed to the child. "And this little one?" Zara's expression changed, a shadow passing over its features. It made a series of complicated gestures, accompanied by more clicks and trills. Sarah's translator struggled to keep up, but she managed to piece together the gist of it. The child was Zara's offspring, but its other parent was gone, lost in some kind of conflict. Sarah's heart ached as she realized the depth of Zara's situation. A widow, alone on what seemed to be the outskirts of their civilization, struggling to care for a young child. Sarah's gaze drifted back to her ship. She had her own problems to deal with, but something about Zara's plight stirred a deep well of empathy within her. She'd always prided herself on her self-reliance, but right now, they both seemed to be in need of help. Making a decision, Sarah pointed to herself, then to Zara and the child, then to Zara's dwelling, a structure half hidden among the crystal formations. Together, she asked, miming walking. Zara hesitated for a long moment, clearly weighing the potential threat against the offer of assistance. Finally, it nodded, rising gracefully to its feet. The child clung to Zara's leg, staring up at Sarah with undisguised fascination. As they made their way to Zara's home, Sarah's mind raced. Her mission had been a simple one: chart this sector of space, catalog any habitable planets, and return to Earth. Now she found herself stranded on an alien world, unable to contact her superiors, and forming an unlikely alliance with a grieving widow and her child. She glanced at Zara, who was watching her with a mixture of wariness and hope. Despite the gravity of her situation, Sarah felt a spark of excitement. This was why she joined the Exploration Corps. After all, to encounter new life, to bridge the gap between different species. As they approached Zara's dwelling, Sarah made a silent vow. She would find a way to repair her ship and complete her mission. But first, she would do whatever she could to help Zara and the child. It was the human thing to do. Little did Sarah know that this chance encounter would change not only her life, but the fate of two civilizations. As the alien sun set on her first day on this strange new world, the stage was set for an adventure beyond anything she could have imagined. Building trust. The days that followed Sarah's crash landing blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. Each morning, she'd wake at dawn, the alien suns casting a lavender glow through the crystalline walls of Zara's dwelling. She'd spend the morning attempting to repair her ship, her hands covered in grease and alien plant matter she discovered had remarkable lubricating properties. In the afternoons, she'd return to Zara's home, where a curious dance of cultural exchange would unfold. Despite the limitations of her universal translator, Sarah found herself picking up bits and pieces of Zara's melodic language. In turn, she taught Zara and the child, whose name she learned was Lux, simple English phrases. Earth, Sarah would say, pointing to herself. I come from Earth. Earth, Lux would repeat, his large eyes wide with wonder. The child was a quick learner, soaking up every bit of information Sarah offered like a sponge. Zara, for her part, seemed to oscillate between gratitude for Sarah's help and wariness of the strange alien in their midst. But as the days passed, Sarah noticed the tension in Zara's shoulders slowly easing, her melodic voice taking on warmer tones when they spoke. One afternoon, about a week into her stay, Sarah was teaching Lux about human customs. She'd drawn a crude picture of a handshake in the soft soil outside Zara's dwelling. This is how humans greet each other, Sarah explained, demonstrating the motion. We shake hands. Lux trilled excitedly, extending one of his forearms. Sarah gently took it, giving it a small shake. The child giggled, a sound like tinkling crystals that never failed to make Sarah smile. Zara watched from the doorway, her head tilted in curiosity. Why? She asked, her grasp of English improving daily. Sarah paused, realizing she'd never really thought about it. I guess it's a way of showing we come in peace. In our ancient past, it was a way of showing we weren't holding a weapon. Zara's expression changed, a shadow passing over her features. Sarah had noticed this happened whenever anything related to conflict came up. She was about to change the subject when a high-pitched screech split the air. Sarah whirled around, her hand instinctively going to the blaster at her hip. At the edge of the crystal forest that surrounded Zara's dwelling, a massive creature had emerged. It looked like a cross between a bear and a praying mantis, with razor-sharp claws and multifaceted eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. Zara let out a terrified trill, sweeping Lux into her arms and retreating into the dwelling. Sarah stood her ground, mind racing. Her blaster might take the creature down, but the noise could attract others. She needed another solution. Her eyes fell on the crystal formations surrounding them. An idea struck her, crazy, but just might work. Zara, she called out. I need something reflective, like a mirror. quickly. To her relief, Zara seemed to understand. She emerged a moment later, holding out a polished piece of the same crystal their dwelling was made of. Sarah snatched it up, angling it to catch the light of the setting suns. The beast charged, its claws leaving deep furrows in the soil. Sarah held her ground, heartbeat thundering in her ears. At the last moment, she angled the crystal, sending a blinding burst of refracted sunlight directly into the creature's eyes. The effect was immediate. The beast reared back, screeching in confusion and pain. It stumbled, shaking its massive head, before turning tail and lumbering back into the forest. For a long moment, the only sound was Sarah's heavy breathing. Then she felt a touch on her arm. She turned to see Zara standing beside her, Lux clinging to her leg. "You saved us," Zara said softly. Sarah managed a shaky smile. "Well, I couldn't let anything happen to my new friends, could I?" Zara's large eyes seemed to shimmer with emotion. Without warning, she reached out, taking Sarah's hand in two of her own. She shook it, just as Sarah had demonstrated earlier. "Thank you, friend," Zara said. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She'd come to this planet as an explorer, expecting to find new lands, new species. Instead, she'd found something far more precious, a connection that transcended the vast gulf between their worlds. That night, as they shared a meal of strange but delicious alien fruits, the atmosphere in Zara's dwelling was noticeably warmer. Lux regaled them with excited trills, reenacting Sarah's standoff with the beast in adorably exaggerated pantomime. Zara laughed, a sound Sarah realized she'd never heard before, and even attempted a few jokes in her broken English. As Sarah lay down to sleep that night, staring up at the alien stars through the crystal ceiling, she felt a sense of contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Her ship still needed repairs, her mission was still unfulfilled, but somehow none of that seemed to matter as much anymore. She was billions of miles from Earth, stranded on a world she'd never heard of a week ago. And yet, somehow, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Little did Sarah know that this newfound trust and friendship would soon be put to the ultimate test. As she drifted off to sleep, events were unfolding far beyond Zara's little homestead, events that would threaten not just their budding friendship, but the very survival of Zara's entire species. Looming threat. The sound of urgent trilling jolted Sarah from her sleep. She sat up, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Before remembering where she was, Zara stood in the doorway of the sleeping chamber, her iridescent skin pulsing with agitation. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, instantly alert. Zara's words came out in a rushed stream that Sarah's translator struggled to keep up with. "Others. Coming. Bad ones. The ones who took my mate." Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd suspected that the conflict Zara had alluded to wasn't entirely over, but she hadn't expected it to reach this far-flung outpost. "How many? When?" "Many," Zara replied, her large eyes filled with fear. "Soon. We must go." Sarah's mind raced. Fleeing might seem like the safest option, but where would they go? And what about the other members of Zara's settlement? There weren't many. Sarah had seen perhaps a dozen dwellings scattered among the crystal formations, but she couldn't bear the thought of abandoning them. A plan began to form in her mind. It was risky, possibly even foolhardy, but it was better than running blindly into the wilderness. "No," she said firmly. "We're not going anywhere. We're going to fight." Zara recoiled, clearly shocked by the suggestion. "Fight? But we are not warriors. We're peaceful." Sarah stood, placing a reassuring hand on Zara's shoulder. "Sometimes, peace has to be defended. And you might not be warriors, but I am. Or at least I have training. If we work together, we might stand a chance." For a long moment, Zara was silent, internal conflict evident in her expressive eyes. Finally, she nodded. "What must we do?" The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Sarah sent Zara to warn the other settlers while she ran to her crashed ship. She returned with an armful of equipment, emergency flares, a portable force field generator, and most importantly, a long-range scanner. As the settlers gathered in the central clearing, fear and confusion evident on their alien faces, Sarah laid out her plan. The scanner had picked up a group of about 30 hostiles approaching from the north. They were still a few hours out, which gave Sarah and the settlers time to prepare. "We can't match them in direct combat," Sarah explained, using Zara as a translator. "But we don't have to. We just need to convince them that attacking this settlement isn't worth the cost." She divided the settlers into groups, assigning each a task. Some were sent to gather the sticky sap from certain plants, which Sarah planned to use as an adhesive to slow down the invaders. Others were tasked with repositioning the crystal formations to create choke points and blind spots. As the suns began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, Sarah surveyed their handiwork with grim satisfaction. The once open settlement had been transformed into a maze of crystal and vegetation, with hidden pitfalls and dead ends that would frustrate and disorient any invading force. Zara approached, Lux clinging tightly to her leg. "It is done," she said softly. "But will it be enough?" Sarah wished she could offer a guarantee, but the truth was, she didn't know. This makeshift defense was a far cry from the military operations she'd been trained for. But looking at Zara, at Lux, at all the peaceful beings who had placed their trust in her, Sarah felt a surge of determination. "It has to be," she replied, her voice steady. "We've done all we can to prepare. Now we wait." As night fell, an eerie silence descended on the settlement. Sarah positioned herself at the northern edge, her blaster at the ready. Zara insisted on staying with her, while Lux and the other children were hidden away in the most secure dwelling. Hours passed, the tension ratcheting up with each moment. Sarah was beginning to wonder if the scanner had malfunctioned when she heard it. A low rumble, growing steadily louder. Her grip tightened on her blaster. "They're here," she whispered. Zara's skin pulsed with fear, but to Sarah's surprise, she straightened up, a look of fierce determination on her alien features. "We are ready," she said. As the first of the invaders appeared at the edge of the settlement, Sarah felt a curious calm settle over her. She was billions of miles from home, preparing to defend an alien race she'd known for less than 2 weeks. It wasn't the mission she'd signed up for, but somehow it felt right. She glanced at Zara, seeing her own resolve mirrored in those large, expressive eyes. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, human and alien, united against a common threat. Sarah took a deep breath, her finger resting lightly on the trigger of her blaster. "Let's show them what happens when they mess with our family," she said. Zara nodded, understanding the sentiment if not the exact words. As the invaders stepped into the first of their traps, Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The battle for the settlement, and perhaps the future of Zara's entire species, was battle for survival. The invaders surged into the settlement, their aggressive confidence quickly giving way to confusion as they encountered Sarah's carefully laid traps. The sticky sap clung to their feet, slowing their advance, while the repositioned crystals created a disorienting maze that separated their forces. Sarah watched from her hidden vantage point, her heart pounding. The plan was working, but she knew it wouldn't hold them off forever. She caught Zara's eye and nodded. It was time for Phase 2. With a series of sharp trills, Zara signaled to the other settlers. Suddenly, the night air was filled with an otherworldly chorus as dozens of hidden aliens began to sing. The crystalline structures around them amplified the sound, creating a haunting, disorienting effect. The invaders faltered, clearly unprepared for this strange form of resistance. Sarah saw her opportunity and took it. She activated the emergency flares, tossing them into strategic positions around the settlement. The sudden bursts of bright light, reflected and refracted by the crystals, created a dazzling, disorienting display. Between the sound, the light, and the physical obstacles, the invading force was in chaos. Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would be enough to drive them away. But then she saw him, a large, heavily armored alien who seemed to be the leader. Unlike his disoriented troops, his gaze was sharp and focused. With a series of guttural commands, he began to rally his forces. Sarah knew they were running out of time. She turned to Zara. "We need to take out their leader," she said urgently. "If he falls, the rest might retreat." Zara's eyes widened in understanding, but also fear. "How?" she asked. Sarah's mind raced. Her blaster might be able to penetrate the leader's armor, but at this distance, with all the chaos, she couldn't guarantee a clear shot. They needed to get closer. An idea struck her. Crazy, potentially suicidal, but it just might work. She quickly explained her plan to Zara, whose expression shifted from disbelief to determination. "I will do it," Zara said firmly. Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Be careful," she said softly. As Zara slipped away, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out from her hiding place. "Hey," she shouted, waving her arms. "Over here, you overgrown lobsters." The insult might have been lost in translation, but the intent was clear. Several invaders turned towards her, weapons raised. Sarah didn't wait for them to fire. She took off running, leading them on a wild chase through the crystal maze. Her heart pounded as she ducked and weaved, the sound of pursuit close behind her. Blaster fire sizzled past her, shattering crystals and sending shards flying. A glancing hit caught her arm, sending a jolt of pain through her body, but she gritted her teeth and kept running. Just when she thought her luck had run out, she heard it, the sound of Zara's signal. Sarah skidded to a halt and dropped to the ground, covering her head. A moment later, the world exploded into light and sound. The portable force field generator, rigged to overload, sent out a massive electromagnetic pulse. The invaders' energy weapons sputtered and died, and their communication devices erupted in a cascade of sparks. In the moment of stunned silence that followed, Sarah heard a triumphant trill. She looked up to see Zara perched atop a tall crystal formation, the limp form of the invaders' leader dangling from her grasp. Somehow, in the chaos of the pulse, Zara had managed to ambush him. The remaining invaders, disarmed and leaderless, began to retreat. Their confident advance had turned into a panicked rout, fleeing from the settlement they had thought would be an easy target. As the sounds of battle faded, replaced by the victorious cries of the settlers, Sarah slumped against a crystal, exhaustion and pain catching up with her. She looked down at her arm, wincing at the sight of the blaster burn. Suddenly, Zara was there, her cool hands gently examining Sarah's wound. "You are hurt," she said, her voice thick with concern. Sarah managed a weak smile. "It's not too bad. Nothing compared to what you just did. Zara, that was incredible." Zara's skin flushed a deeper blue, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as their equivalent of a blush. "I did what I had to," she said softly, "to protect my home, my child, my friend." The weight of the word hung between them, full of unspoken emotion. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm honored to be your friend, Zara," she said. Their moment was interrupted by an excited trill. Lux came bounding up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. He threw himself into Zara's arms, then reached out to touch Sarah's uninjured arm, as if reassuring himself that they were both really there. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Sarah looked around at the settlement. The once peaceful crystal structures were scared by blaster fire, the ground torn up by the struggle. But amidst the destruction, she saw something beautiful. Aliens emerging from hiding, embracing each other, their voices raised in songs of relief and victory. They had done it. Against all odds, this ragtag group of peaceful settlers, led by a stranded human explorer and a grieving alien widow, had repelled an invasion force. As the twin suns began to rise, bathing the battlefield in soft lavender light, Sarah felt a profound sense of belonging. She had come to this planet as an outsider, a curious explorer. Now, standing amidst the aftermath of battle, her arm around Zora's shoulders, and Lux clinging to her leg, she realized she had found something she never expected, a home. But as Sarah looked out at the horizon, where the last of the invaders had disappeared, she knew their troubles weren't over. This attack was likely just the beginning. If they were going to survive in the long term, they would need help. Sarah's gaze drifted to her crashed ship. Perhaps it was time to see if that long-range communicator could be salvaged after all. Earth needed to know what was happening here. And just maybe, it was time for humanity to make its grand entrance onto the galactic stage. With renewed determination, Sarah turned to Zara and Lux. "Come on," she said, managing a tired smile. "We've got work to do." As they made their way back to the heart of the settlement, Sarah's mind was already racing with plans. This battle was won, but the war for survival, and for a future where humans and aliens could coexist in peace, was just beginning. A new family. In the weeks following the battle, the settlement underwent a transformation. The scars of combat slowly faded, replaced by new growth and carefully reconstructed crystal formations. But the changes went far beyond the physical. Sarah watched with pride as the once timid settlers began to stand taller, move with more confidence. The victory, hard won, and against impossible odds, had awoken something in them, a realization that they were capable of far more than they had ever imagined. Zara, in particular, had blossomed. The grieving widow Sarah had first encountered was now a respected leader among her people. She organized patrols, coordinated repairs, and worked tirelessly to improve their defenses. More than once, Sarah caught herself staring in admiration at Zara's graceful form as she moved through the settlement, her voice ringing out with authority and compassion. As for Sarah herself, she split her time between helping with the settlement's defenses and working on her ship. The long-range communicator had been damaged in the crash, but she was determined to repair it. Earth needed to know what was happening here, and these people needed help if they were going to survive in the long term. It was during one of her repair sessions that Lux found her. The young alien had taken to following Sarah around, his curiosity about the human and her technology seemingly boundless. "What doing?" Lux asked in his broken English, peering at the tangle of wires Sarah was working on. Sarah smiled, setting down her tools. "I'm trying to fix this," she explained, pointing to the communicator, "so I can talk to my people far away." Lux's eyes widened. "You go?" he asked, a note of distress in his voice. Sarah's heart clenched at the fear in the child's voice. "No, Lux," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm trying to bring help here." Lux seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding solemnly. "Good," he said. "You stay. You, family." The simple declaration hit Sarah like a physical blow. Family. When was the last time she had truly felt like she belonged somewhere? Her life in the exploration court had been exciting, fulfilling in its way, but also lonely. Always moving, always searching, never putting down roots. But here, billions of miles from Earth, she had found something she didn't even know she was looking for. A place where she was needed, where she could make a real difference. And people. Aliens, yes, but people nonetheless, who had accepted her, who wanted her to stay. As if summoned by her thoughts, Zara appeared in the doorway of the ship. "Sarah," she said, her melodic voice tinged with concern. "You work too hard. Come, eat with us." Sarah looked at the communicator, then back at Zara and Lux. The repair could wait a few hours. She stood, wincing slightly at the stiffness in her muscles. "You're right," she said. "Let's eat." That evening, as they shared a meal in Zara's dwelling, Sarah found herself struck by how comfortable it all felt. Lux chattered away in a mix of his native language and the English he was quickly picking up. Zara laughed at the child's antics, her eyes crinkling with mirth, and Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the spicy alien food. As the meal wound down, Zara grew serious. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft but intense, "we need to talk." Sarah nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. "Of course. What is it?" Zara seemed to gather herself, her iridescent skin pulsing with emotion. "You have done so much for us. You have taught us to defend ourselves, given us hope. But there is more I would ask of you." Sarah leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Anything, Zara. What do you need?" "Stay," Zara said simply, "not just to help fight. Stay, with us. With me. Help me raise Lux." The request hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sarah's mind raced. Stay, permanently. Give up her career, her life on Earth. It was a monumental decision, one that would change the course of her life forever. But as she looked at Zara, at the hope and fear warring in those large, expressive eyes, Sarah realized the decision had already been made. Perhaps it had been made the moment she stepped out of her crashed ship and saw Zara and Lux huddled against that crystal formation. "Yes," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll stay." The joy that bloomed on Zara's face was like watching a sunrise. She reached out, taking Sarah's hands in her own. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have given us so much. Now, let us give you a home." Lux, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, climbed into Sarah's lap, wrapping his small arms around her in a tight hug. "Family," he said again, with the simple certainty of a child. As Sarah held Lux close, her eyes meeting Zara's over the child's head, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged. This was her family now. The challenges ahead were daunting. There would be more battles to fight, both against external threats and the prejudices that would inevitably arise when Earth learned of this new alien race. The path to peaceful coexistence between humans and aliens would be long and fraught with difficulties. But in that moment, holding Lux and looking at Zara, Sarah knew it was a path worth walking. She had come to this planet as an explorer, seeking new worlds and new civilizations. She had found so much more: a purpose, a family, a home. As the alien sun set outside, casting the crystal dwelling in a soft, ethereal light, Sarah Chen, once a captain in Earth's exploration corps, now the adoptive parent of an alien child and partner to an alien widow, felt truly at peace for the first time in years. The adventure that had begun with a crash landing was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever the future held, Sarah knew she would face it with Zara and Lux by her side. Together, they would bridge the gap between two worlds, showing that love, family, and the bonds of friendship could transcend the vast gulfs of space. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Lux curled up beside her, and Zara's comforting presence nearby. Sarah's last thought was of the message she would send to Earth when she finally got the communicator working. Made first contact. Found something amazing. Requesting permission for permanent assignment as ambassador to the crystal people of Zara's world. Will send full report soon. Tell command. Tell them I'm home.